Hi, I'm Chef Tammy Brawley from the Green Kitchen, and welcome to Heart of the Home. Today we are doing a pisciale d'air, and what I just said was basically an onion tart. Great recipe used for brunches, even a light dinner with a salad. We're going to be using puff pastry, onions, some fresh thyme, a little bit of wine, and some Gruyere and some Parmesan cheese, not to mention some delicious Kalamata olives. We're starting out with a saute pan on my burner here, and I've added butter to it, but I'm also going to add oil. And you might wonder, why in the world would she add two fats? Well, actually the olive oil is added to keep the butter from burning. You just really want enough to cover the bottom of your pan. We need to caramelize the onions, and that just means we're going to make them turn brown. But it is pretty much a lower temperature to caramelize. So what I've done here is I've already sliced up the onions that I want, and we're going to put those in the pan. And yes, it is a lot of onions, but we're going to be filling this tart. And we'll let those start to cook down a little bit, and we'll work on our puff pastry. Pastry is found in your grocer's freezer. There's a couple different brands. I don't really have one favorite over the other. Some chefs might. But I've unfolded it already and put it on a sheet of parchment paper. And I'm actually going to turn it in the opposite direction because I want to start with length, and I want to go from the middle to the top and then from the middle to the bottom. So we roll it out this way, and then we roll it out this way. We will turn it because I want it to fit the pan, but maybe about 3 rolls in each direction. Turn your parchment paper. I would not recommend doing this on a board by itself. It will stick. I do have a little flour here in case I need it, but I'm also going to move it while it's on the parchment over to my baking sheet. From the middle to the end, middle to the end. Now we're going to brush it with a little bit of egg white. And I used my handy dandy fork to whisk that up. You have a choice here. You can either cut the strips and then reformat them on top of the pastry, or you can simply roll them over on the edges, which is kind of a time saver in my opinion. So I'm just going to brush the outside edges a little bit. And one of the things I love to use is a pie docker. It looks like a medieval tool. You can certainly use a fork for this step. I just want to run some holes in it to kind of air dock it a little bit. That way it doesn't bake up too much when we have it in the oven. And again, this is the step that you can either cut the strips and go and reattach them to the pastry. Either direction you want to use, either rolling it like I'm doing or cut the strips. It's really up to you. But the main thing that you want to remember is to use the egg white. We actually call that glue in the kitchen. And that's just a plain egg white that I've whipped up with a fork. I'm going to roll it up this way. And all I'm doing is developing a nice little border here. That's all I'm doing. We're going to do this way now. And if you want to get a little fancy, you can leave your corners tucked out like that. Makes it nice and pretty for presentation. I'm going to come back and stir the onions again. They're starting to get a little soft, but we do want them quite a bit further along than they are now. So we'll be back in about 20 to 30 minutes. All right, so I have added some sliced Kalamata olives to our sauteed onions. They're cooking down quite nicely. I do want to remind you that, you know, recipes are guidelines. There are no recipe police that are going to come and knock on your door and tell you you're doing something wrong. The recipe tells you to add the wine before you add the olives. I'm going to add the wine afterwards. Not anything in the world wrong with that. We're going to let that reduce down a little bit. Will not take very long. And then for time purposes, I did go ahead and add a few caramelized onions to the bottom of my crust. So you're going to see it be a little bit brown there. And then I went ahead and added some Gruyere and some Parmesan cheese to that. I've turned my heat off now for the onions and the olives. And I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle a little fresh thyme leaves. When you work with thyme, or really any herb that has a soft stem, it's okay if some stem gets on your product. You wouldn't want a twig, like a rosemary twig, or a hard thyme, like this piece here, for instance, is very hard. I don't want that in my tart, but I do want to add the leaves. So if a little bit of stalk gets in, it's perfectly fine. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to pile our onions and olives on top of our tart. We're going to have basically a little mountain. I'm going to go ahead and start spooning to start with. If I tried to dump it, it would be a little bit of a mess. So we're going to move that around. And I'm just going to put it down and try to keep it off of the crust if you can. Don't worry about it if it gets on there. All we're looking is to brown those edges, those nice little rolled up border that we made. And then I'll come back and I'm going to hit it with a few more thyme leaves on top. And then I do have just a little bit of cheese left over, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that with some more cheese on the top. This is a mixture of the Gruyere cheese and the Parmesan. Cheese of choice for you guys, whatever you'd like. So now we're going to put this in the oven, and it's going to bake about 20 to 30 minutes. What you're looking for is a nice golden brown, and I think we have that. So let's get it out of the oven. Nice and brown on my edges. You can see where the puff pastry baked up very nicely. Now the trick is, while it's hot, moving it to the cutting board. Let's see if I can do such a thing. Sometimes when I work with puff pastry, I can lift up the edges and just kind of push the paper underneath. Sometimes. Then again, sometimes you can cut it right while it's on the paper. There's nothing wrong with that either. You also really do want to let it sit for a few minutes before you cut it. You want to cut it into serving pieces, ever how many guests you have. Obviously, this would feed probably about 4 people or so. I would say we can probably get away with about 6 pieces. So I'm going to start on one edge. And just like brownies, I love a corner piece. A little bit more crust on there. Love doing that. You know, one of these days we're going to have smell-o-vision. You guys will be able to smell how delicious this is. I'm going to move a piece to my serving platter, right there in the middle. This is a pissaladière, which is French for onion tart. We've got some caramelized onions, some olives, and some fresh thyme, and some Gruyere and Parmesan cheese. I'm Tammy Brawley with The Green Kitchen. Join us next time on Heart of the Home.
Recipes from the Heart of the Home can be found on the Virginia Farm Bureau website at vafb.com/recipes, as well as on Chef Tammy Brawley's website at greenkitchenrichmond.com.